Okay, we're going to talk some philosophy today, specifically the topic of ideology or ideology, and what that means. Not ideology in kind of the colloquial sense of like leftist ideology, right-wing ideologies, conservative, liberal, that sort of stuff. But ideology in the sense that like philosophers within and sort of adjacent to the continental tradition talk about it. So someone like Slavoj Žižek and Todd McGowan, who builds on him, for them, ideology is not primarily about what you think. It's about how we actually desire, okay, and even more importantly, how we enjoy things. So Zizek argues that ideology is not something outside of us that's sort of manipulating our beliefs, our thoughts, or something like that. It's the very structure of the social world or social reality that we take for granted. The structure of the social world or reality that we take for granted, okay? And McGowan shows how capitalism specifically functions in a way that depends on our dissatisfaction, okay? How our feeling of not being enough or not having enough, something like that, is not a glitch in the system. It's actually the engine that keeps capitalism running, okay? So just a quick roadmap. We're going to talk about ideology as the background of reality, why ideology survives even when we know it's false. Talk about McGowan's kind of extension of Zizek on this stuff, in terms of desire depending on lack as against excess, capitalism and the business of dissatisfaction, and then kind of why this matters. Okay. All right. So when we think ideology, like I mentioned, we tend to think of like a worldview or like sets of opinions that people hold. But Zizek sees ideology as something much deeper. It's the implicit background that structures how we experience reality. It's not what we say we believe. It's what we act like we believe and how we act in terms of what we believe, okay? So examples of this, things like hard work defines your worth. Productivity is a moral virtue. If you're unhappy, you should get something to fix it, purchase something. And success is measured individually, not collectively. Things like that. We don't consciously choose these usually. They feel natural to us when we adopt them. And that's precisely how ideology works. Okay. Now, classical ideology critiques assumed people were fooled, basically, tricked by propaganda, something that kind of basic and simple. But today, we kind of all know things like, advertising manipulates us. We know that social media extracts our attention in various ways. We know consumer culture is very shallow, things like that. Hustle, the constant hustle can burn people out, things like that, okay? And yet, we keep participating in it. All of us. Zizek paraphrases Marx by saying, they know very well what they are doing, and yet they do it. Okay? Awareness of this doesn't actually free us from it. Awareness is actually part of the system itself and keeps it going. So the modern ideological subject is therefore fundamentally cynical. Okay. Now, McGowan deepens this insight and says that we do not desire things because they satisfy us. We desire them because they do not satisfy us. Desire depends on a lack. We desire as long as fulfillment remains out of reach. As long as it's still something we can't quite get, right? And this is why. The dream job leaves us restless, right? The new phone excites us for a week or something like that, the iPhone 17, a life goal achieved can feel kind of oddly hollow. And when we finally get what we think we want, desire collapses. And that collapse feels worse than disappointment. So we move the goalpost, right? Slightly better job, slightly better apartment, slightly better body, slightly better version of ourselves, something like that. Desire keeps this in motion, okay? The problem is not the objects. The problem is that we expect them to actually kind of complete us and fill some kind of a gap in that lack, okay? But it just does not. Capitalism, of course, is going to monetize this kind of dissatisfaction by nature. And this is kind of McGowan's key political point. Capitalism does not sell satisfaction. It sells the promise of satisfaction. Okay? And it's a lie, because it's a promise that's never actually fulfilled. Otherwise, the system would stop moving. It wouldn't work anymore. So capitalism turns lack into a business model, basically. Your sense of incompleteness is not personal, it's functional within capitalism. It's not a flaw, it's a built-in feature. Okay. Why does this matter, though? Why should this matter to us today? Because we live in a culture that's saturated with dissatisfaction, and we're taught to experience that dissatisfaction as personal failure. Burnout, anxiety, depression, loneliness are all obviously rising in every demographic. And what does our culture tell us in response to that? Not to question why, or the system itself that's actually kind of keeping us captive in that way. It tells us to improve ourselves individually. If you're exhausted, you might need better time management. And these are like basic things, but this isn't actually going to solve the problem of ideology, right? If you feel empty, you're supposed to, do self-care, buy self-care products, that sort of stuff. If you feel left behind, you should grind harder, right? If you feel disconnected from people, build your own personal brand or something like that, right? So our suffering and our feeling of dissatisfaction is interpreted as a sign that we are insufficient, not that the structure of life under late capitalism demands more than humans are actually built to bear. Okay? In other words, the system produces the wound and sells us a bandage, and then sells us the shame for not healing fast enough. Okay? So dissatisfaction is not proof of your failing. Okay, dissatisfaction is the operating system of the world that you are in. Recognizing this breaks the spell of pure self-blame, but it doesn't get us quite out of that. Next time, maybe I can talk a bit more about ways of pressing back against this, not just simply being aware of this, that we're all kind of controlled by this stuff, and it's what's structuring reality, but actually kind of how to respond to it. And with that, this has been Apocalypse here, Christianity you can live with.